Okay, so last time we got our vehicle set up. It's doing this fun bouncy thing, which is interesting, but not quite what we want. One of the issues we're having right now is it's a little too over the top. So one of the ways we can address that is by stabilizing things just a little bit. I'm going to do that by coming in here, going into my blueprints, and opening up my player vehicle BP. And we're going to go ahead, and the first thing we're going to do is just select that static mesh. And again, make sure that we're applying some damping. So if you mouse over it, damping is a drag force that reduces linear movement. So linear movement is all the up and down bouncing and forward and back and all of that. Angular damping is where it's rotating over. I'm going to suggest kind of a good starting point being a value of 1. So I'm going to say linear damping of 1, and probably angular also of 1. And that should keep our vehicle from bouncing quite so much. Oops. Okay, you can see it's starting to stabilize now. Okay, it's bouncing up and down a little bit, but that's because it started up in the air, and that's all it is. Okay, cool. Now let's go ahead, and right now we're still flying around in ghost mode, and that's because right now our pawn is actually kind of this ghost mode thing. That's the pawn we're possessing. But instead what we want to do is possess this, which is our vehicle. So let's go ahead and do a few things here. I'm going to go back into the player vehicle BP. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and add a spring arm component. Okay. I'm going to go in the viewport so you can kind of see what's happening here. And I'm just going to lift it up to kind of the top here so you can kind of see what it is. You can see I have this now spring arm. It's pinned here in the center of our box, and it goes back here. Okay. With the spring arm still selected, I'm going to go ahead and add component, and we're going to add a camera component. Okay. This should start to seem a little bit familiar. This is what we did with our 2D side scroller. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and select our spring arm, and I'm going to go ahead and increase the distance a little bit. I'll do maybe 500 for now. Again, all this stuff can be tweaked later. I'm going to lift this up just a hair. And then I'm going to go ahead and even rotate this camera down just a little bit. And we'll see how this comes out. We can make some tweaks to this later. But we now have our camera set up. Okay, and this time we are using a perspective camera. This is a 3D game, so we don't need to switch this to ortho. We're going to leave this on a standard perspective camera. Okay. Now, right now, we have a player start here, and we just have this kind of dropped in the world. And you can see if I click on it, you can kind of see how it's going to look right there. But I want to be able to spawn and possess this camera. Can somebody remind me, from what we did on all of our other games, what are the steps I need to take so that when I start the game, I spawn in kind of in that camera view with control of that car? Does anybody remember? Okay, so we're going to start out, and our first step is we're going to go ahead and create a new custom game mode. So I'm going to go to Blueprint Class, we're going to create a custom game mode, and I'll just go ahead and call this Vehicle Game Mode _ BP. And what do I need to change in here? Now that I'm in my custom game mode, folks, what do I need to change so that this does what I want it to do? Spawn camera? No, I mean, good guess. But this is actually the part where we need to change the default pawn class. So instead of loading the default pawn, which is what we've been seeing, that ghost camera thing, we're going to go ahead and load our player vehicle BP. Okay, that's going to be our new default pawn. Okay. Now I've created my custom game mode. If I hit play right now, is it going to work? Okay, what do I need to do, Abby? Or anyone, before it'll work. Okay, I'm gonna open my project settings. And where do I want to go in here? If you can do cameras separate, or you can do them inside of your pawn. It kind of depends on how you want them to work. Maps and modes is correct. And then what am I going to change in here? And while she's telling us that, what I'm going to say, or while somebody's telling me what I need to change in here, you can do the camera in or outside of the character. Doing it inside the character works really well when you want the camera to actually follow the character. If you don't want the camera to follow the character, then it's probably better to spawn it outside of the pawn, outside of the character. But that's a good question, Corey. It just depends on what you're doing. So we're going to go ahead and change that default game mode base to vehicle game mode underscore BP. At some point, you're right, Kirsten, we probably will want to change the game instance, but we haven't created a new custom game instance yet, so we're not quite ready for that yet. This is also a good time to switch your default startup map to something you actually are using. Okay. Go ahead, and I'm going to hit save, and then I will hit play. Okay. And now get this kind of behind view of my car. And I obviously have two cars in my scene because the other one's still in the world from where I had it before. Okay. I can't do anything yet, but I am kind of getting started here. Okay. So let's go ahead, and now that we have this spawning, let's go ahead and set up some inputs for us to be able to, actually put the gas on, put the pedal to the metal, and actually turn the steering wheel. So we're going to go to Edit, Project Settings again, and we're going to look at our inputs. We're going to go ahead and use axis mappings this time. You could probably get by with action mappings when you're using a keyboard, but the advantage here is if you plug in a gamepad, if you set it up for a gamepad, then we could actually kind of not put our foot all the way to the floor. Like, if we press W, we're going to be basically putting our foot on the floor. But if we had a gamepad, we were using left thumbstick, we could push it forward like halfway, and then we'd be, be putting our foot down 50%. So it wouldn't be trying to go 120 miles an hour, and we'd be trying to go 60. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and call this first one forward movement. And I'm going to go ahead and put in keyboard W. And I'll leave that at 1. And then I'm going to add another axis mapping. And we're going to go ahead and do left, right, turning. And I'm going to put in A and D for this. And of course, you guys can put in your arrow keys as well. But please go ahead and put in A and D, just for my sake. I'm so used to using them now that it feels weird to use arrow keys. So I'm going to use A and D. And this is for turning left and right. I want both of these to be 1, folks, you think? Should both be a positive 1? And if not, what should they be? One, negative 1. Thank you. Okay. So with A, I'm turning left, and that's going to be a negative 1. Okay, so we have our input set up, but now we actually have to apply forces to this, very similarly to what we did with our Asteroids game. So we're going to go in here, and we're going to go into Player Vehicle BP. And I'm going to just, this is a bit tick, so I'll go ahead and label this. Kind of move it up here. And then we'll come down, find some room, and I'm going to go ahead and do my forward movement. So I found my axis of it that I created called forward movement. And now we're going to add force at location. We're just going to do add force. I mentioned before again, there's, we used add force location for the shocks. We could use add force at location to kind of have a more specific result on the way this animation looks. If we pushed on certain parts of this box from behind, it's going to behave differently than if we did just add force overall. But for simplicity's sake, let's go with add force. If some of you guys have some extra time, you might explore seeing how the movement changes by using add force at location as opposed to applying the force just across the whole object. Okay, so what we need to do now is we need to, we want to put force behind this thing, okay? So this is our object, and we want to always have it going like, we need to, it's like an invisible finger is being pushed right here on the back and it's pushing it forward. Okay? So, but the thing is, of course, if I just put in like a value of X, if I just did it on the world settings, it would keep moving this way, but even when I turned it, it would still keep moving this way, which is not what we want, of course. Okay? So we have to actually, what we actually are telling it to do is we want it to move forward in the direction that it's facing, which is just like we did for asteroids. So, we're going to come in here, we're going to split out this force. Actually, what am I thinking? I don't know if you can do that. We're going to go ahead and bring in static mesh, and we're going to get forward location, get forward vector. Okay. And that's going to tell us which way is forward. We're going to multiply the gas pedal times another float value, and this is going to be our, I'm trying to think of how to describe it. I'm just going to go ahead and call this force multiplier for now. There might be a better name for this. Because basically all this value is going to do is give us more oomph. Because if we just plugged in 1 times this vector and tried to make it move forward, it would just crawl. Okay, so we need a bigger value coming out of here, or it won't work. So let's try a value of 100, and we will multiply that with that forward vector. So we're going to go again, float times vector. Here, let's do this. Might be vector times float. Yeah, there we go. And we'll plug these in. And then we will finally plug this in here. We're also going to check acceleration change, because without it checked, you have to have a ridiculously high number to move it. Without this, it ignores the mass of your force. So basically what it comes down to is if you leave it unchecked, if your object is large, then the number has to be a lot higher to move it. If you leave it if you check it, then it kind of ignores how big your object is. Okay. I'm going to compile that and save. Go into here and hit play, and let's see if it can get to move. Okay. You can see it's moving. It's not moving very fast, but it is moving. Boom, collision. Okay, so obviously that value is not high enough, but we can grab that force multiplier. Let's just make it a little higher. Okay. Boom. A little more interesting. Let me just get rid of this for now. Okay. There we go. So we're moving around. It's not too, I mean, it's still slow. We need to increase it still. But this is one of those things you guys will be playing with. Okay. There we go. That's a little bit faster. I mean, and we'll need to still tweak it, I think, but it's moving at least. Okay, cool. We now have forward movement. Okay. let's do our side movement. So left, right, turning. And this time, instead of applying force to our object, what we actually want to do is apply torque. Torque is like turning forces, okay? So we're going to go ahead and say we want to add torque. We'll say in degrees, because most of us just kind of speak degrees easier than we do. I think most of us know what 360 or 180 degrees is. I'm not sure what the equivalent would be in radians. Okay. Now we're going to go to our kind of handy-dandy viewport here and figure out which way I want to rotate it. So this is Y, because it's green. I don't want to rotate it that way. This is X. I don't want it to go this way. I don't want it to roll. So that leaves me with Z. So the value I'm looking to change here is actually my Z value. So I'm going to come in here, split this out, and we're going to be changing the Z value. And all I'm going to do is multiply this axis value. I'm going to say float times float. And I'm going to promote this to a variable. And I'm going to go ahead and just call this, I already called that other one force multiplier. Let's call this rotation multiplier. Again, there's probably some better terms for describing these, but any sort of name is going to help. And I'm going to also check this acceleration change here for the same reason. I'm going to go ahead and start it. We'll start at the same value and see how that goes. So say 1,000. Okay. 1,000 may be too fast for turning. So let's try back. Let's go back to 100 and see what that looks like. Okay, here we go. Now, ultimately, we will be making some tweaks to this. We will set it up so that you don't turn as sharp at certain speeds. When you're moving slower, your turns should be wider. Up to a certain point, you will turn sharper. So, like when you're driving, you know, obviously, if you're driving 1 mile an hour, you're going to turn pretty slow. But if you're driving 40 miles an hour, you're probably, you know, you're going to be still turning at a tighter corner. And if you're going at like 80 or 100 miles an hour, it's going to be a much slower turn also. So we will look later at kind of some of the fine-tuning things we can do to fix that. Okay. One issue we have with this game is if you do flip your car over, right now you're kind of screwed. So keep that in mind. We don't have a feature to turn your car back over yet, but that is also something we'll look at later. Okay. Okay. We'll go ahead and call this left, right, turning movement. We'll just call it turning. Okay. Yes. Today's video is already online. I just need to put the link on Blackboard, so you'll have access to that soon. And I will upload this. It does take. That last video took like 3 hours. This one probably won't be as long, but it probably will still take an hour or two. But I will try to get it up today. Stay on top of me. Parker caught me last time because I had forgotten about it. You guys keep reminding me because it is something that I kind of get caught up in other things and I forget. But don't let me forget. Okay. Any other questions before we go on to the next step, which is going to be we'll make a few adjustments to this, and then I want to show you guys how to make terrain real quick, so that you can kind of start testing out things and kind of move on from there. Okay. So first of all, one of the things I want to point out, right now, this thing is sitting up pretty high. You know, this might be fine if it's like a monster truck or something, but you know, depending on what kind of vehicle you're doing, it's probably not going to sit quite this high. So one of the things you can change is go in here to your trace length and just lower that number. So instead of the max trace length being 100, maybe let's just try 50. Okay, and now our car's at a little lower to the ground, and you can kind of, you know what I mean? It's a little bit easier there. Okay. Another setting we can do. This is kind of jarring right now. There's a lot of bounce. Well, let's go ahead and we'll set up the terrain, and I'll show you the next thing. But I did want to point out that again, you can adjust the height of the trace, and that does affect how far off the ground you're going to settle in at. Okay, Let's make some terrain. We're just going to do this quick and dirty, but this terrain we have here is not giving us any sort of real feel for any sort of roughness. So let's delete this. We're going to go up here, and to access the landscape tool, you're going to go up here where it says modes. There's this button that says modes here, and you've got a few other tools in here. So today we're going to talk about landscape briefly. Later on we'll talk about foliage, which is how you can paint on trees and bushes and grass and stuff like that. But today we'll do landscape. Again, this is going to be a crash course. This is going to come up like this. This is the, did I change it yet? Yeah, this is the default settings here. You can choose a material. So before I even create the landscape, let's just create a new material. I'll go into Assets. I'm going to right click, and we're going to create a new material right here. Okay. So somebody tell me, what color is my material? Am I on grass? Am I on sand? Am I on dirt? Am I on rock? What color is my material going to be? Gray. Okay. I'm not asking you. Just let's be clear. What do we want it to be? Okay. So we're gonna go with dirt, since dirt sounds cool. You were too late, Kirsten. You were too late. No, let's just because this guy is gray. Let's do some dirt. Okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and make a dirt material. But Kirsten, you make a pavement one, okay? So we're gonna do dirt underscore mat for material. I'm gonna go ahead and double click on this to open it up. And you can see there's an option here for base color, so I just need to plug a node in here. What we're looking for is a constant. So I'm gonna right click, and I'm gonna go ahead and type in constant. And I'm just going to choose a 3-point vector. You could also use a 4-point, but the 4th point would be an alpha channel, which we don't really need right now. So I'm going to use a constant 3 vector. And I'm going to click on this constant over here, and I'm going to choose my color. And so again, if you're Kirsten right now, you're setting it to gray. We're going to go ahead and do some dirt, since that was the other suggestion. There we go. There's some nice brown for us. Cartoon brown. Okay. And I'm going to go ahead and plug this into my base color. You can see it right there, and I'm just going to hit save. Now this is by no means a final thing, but at least we have some color to our object. Okay, we have our dirt mat, so we can choose that from our material. We're going to go ahead and choose that dirt. And now we get to decide whether or not we want to do kind of a low poly world or a high poly world. I'll just go ahead and leave it to default settings for now, and I'm going to hit create. When you get these little shadow lines through here, when you rebuild the lighting, it'll fix that issue. So don't worry about that right now. That's just a temporary issue. You're going to get this brush that appears here, and you can adjust the size over here in this area. But you can use the you can adjust the size right here, make it a little smaller, make it a little bigger. I'm not seeing all of the settings. I feel like we're missing half of our settings. I'll have to look and see. It may just be the brush editing. No. I feel like, I guess it's up here. Oh, they're up here. Here they are. We have up here, we have these different options. Most of these you'll want to mess with, but what we will want is these different sculpting options. So we have sculpt, smooth, flatten, ramp, erosion. We got all kinds of stuff in here. We're going to later on get into painting some stuff. For right now, let's just leave a regular sculpt, and if we do this, I can hold left trigger, and it'll add to my brush. And I think it's... What is that? Oh. I always forget what it is. Hang on a sec. I keep making it bigger. It's shift. Sorry, I couldn't remember what it was. Left trigger adds to the mounds. Shift left trigger makes them smaller. Okay, so this is shift left trigger if you want valleys. So again, left trigger is hills. Shift left trigger is valleys. Okay, and then you can make all these little bumps and excitement and stuff. And if you need to smooth stuff out, you can click the smooth tool and then maybe kind of smooth some things out. So if it looks a little rough, kind of come back and smooth it out a little bit. play. Nope. The issue we had there was that when we created this environment, it's actually a little bit high. So I'm going to go ahead and I need to select my player start, just move it up a little bit. What's going on here? Well, I don't know why my snaps are set at 500, but anyways, that's crazy. Okay, cool. Bam. Okay, so now we have some terrain to go over that's a little more interesting. Okay, cool. Again, we got some hills, we got some valleys now. And it's definitely just much more interesting as far as kind of the environment goes. Assuming you're looking for a more of a, kind of organic terrain, you can do a city for your game if you want. It kind of depends on what you're, what you are imagining for your game. But, terrain's a good option. Okay. Right now, our terrain is actually fairly smooth. It doesn't have a particularly polygonal look to it. If you want it to look that way, like if you want it to feel more polygonal, what you can do is select your world and just scale it up. So I'm going to scale it up by 500. Okay. And I'm going to draw on some new sculptures. Can't even see. Look at that. I may have went too big with the sculpture. Let's try 200. Oh, I'm still on smooth. I was like, what am I having an issue with? Somebody's probably saying that. Okay, I'm not sure why you're having issues with it, Kirsten, but I'll be happy to take a look at it and see what's happening on yours. Let me go ahead and go sculpt. There we go. Okay, so I guess I do need to go larger. It was just that I was in the wrong tool. So if I select landscape tool, let's go ahead and make this more like 500 again. And then the larger you scale it up, the more polygonal it'll appear. This is still pretty smooth. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can kind of start to see the polygons a little bit. You see how you're starting to see some of those harsher edges. The bigger I go, the more it's going to look that way. I'm not saying you have to do this, but if you're going for a very polygonal style, you may want to make, you may want to go bigger just because it might give you more of that look that you're expecting to see. Okay, see that? See how it's very hard edges. You see how you can kind of see that slope. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a good thing, but it's more if you're going for kind of that classic Mario feel. It's going to feel more that way if you keep it low poly like this. Okay. That's really all I want to show you guys for today, because I do want to make the rounds today and chat with people, and I feel like there's probably still some folks that are trying to figure out what their kind of the vision for their game. Certainly do some experimenting on here. Start kind of imagining kind of what your game is going to be. Now that you've seen terrain, you have to decide whether or not you're going to use it, or whether or not, maybe you don't need it. Maybe your game is going to be more like a lot of flat surfaces with ramps and stuff, or maybe it's going to be in a city where there just really isn't hills in the area. I don't know. If you're not sure where to start today, I mean, you can always be starting to work on art. So, if you're doing a motorcycle game, maybe you're making a motorcycle. If you're doing a boat game, maybe you're making a boat. Maybe if you're doing a four-wheeler game, you're going to have it be four-wheelers or tanks or whatever you're making. I mean, honestly, if at any point you feel like you don't have anything to work on, message me, and I will be able to tell you 10 things you could be doing. But you just got to kind of sprinkle time on your artwork whenever you get time. So again, if you feel like you have finished your pre-production and you've done everything I've done today and you feel like you're really good with it all, then start working on your art for your game. Okay, are there any general questions? Let me go ahead and just stop the video here.